Hello, it is time for my September reading wrap up, and it was not my best month for a while, but it was still a really good month. I also can't tell if this camera is a bit wonky, so if it is, I'm sorry, but I've tried to fix it. So in the month of September I only read 18 books. I say only because I have been reading consistently over 20 books every single month for, should we see how long? Okay, so September and January are the only months I have read less than 20 books. And I've had 2 months where I've read 30 or more. So my second worst month of the year, but it's still really good, especially considering as I was at Ashes for 2.5 weeks and I didn't want to take like a huge amount of books, and like the books I did take, I did get them read, but normally I would have read more than that. But you know, we were going to the cinema, we were going to see her nana, we were going to the theatre, we were rewatching series 1 and 2 of Vox Machina and watched the entirety of Has Been Hotel. So I'm not upset about it, it's just a thing. It happened. I'm okay with that, considering how amazing my reading has been this year. I'm quite happy with, you know, having a slower month because I have been reading a lot, but I'm hoping to get back into the swing of things in October because I have some plans, but not huge amounts. So yeah, anyway, that's a different video. But the 18 books I read was a total of 7,371 pages, and it was 74.5 hours of audiobooks. It's really weird, like every single book I read in September, I read with an audiobook. And I don't hate that. I quite enjoyed that. So yeah, star ratings, I had no DNFs, which was good. Almost did. I had no 2 stars, 2 3 stars, 8 4 stars and 8 5 stars. So the ratio was a bit worse than usual. Usually my 5 stars is a lot higher, but I was just reading books that weren't as good. But that's okay, because I was clearing them off of my TBR. Also, can we appreciate it's jumper weather now? The only jumpers I currently have out of storage is my 3 Spirit jerseys and a Loki jumper. Everything else is in storage, and that's my plan for the day after I'm filming this. Anyway, I keep getting distracted. It's been a while since I did a sit down video. I'm trying to remember how I do this. Okay, so let's go in with the books I read. So first up, I read Chef's Kiss by TJ Alexander. This was one of my 12 books for 2024 picks, like my 12 books mug. I bought this book when I was out in Florida, and oh, there's a mark on this book where the sticker came off. I bought this book when I was out in Florida in September 2022, so it's taken me 2 years to read it, but I'm glad I read it. It was a 4-star. It wasn't great. It wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but it was good enough that I am intrigued to read more by TJ Alexander, which is good because I have another one somewhere here, which came in an Afterlight box, which I'm really looking forward to reading. But I really loved the queerness of it. I think my main issue is that it is marketed as a rom-com, and yes, there were funny bits, but I wouldn't count this as a romantic comedy. This was a queer contemporary with a bit of romance. The main plot was not the romance, and for me, a rom-com, the main plot should be the romance. But for this, it was more dealing with their working situation and things going on in their personal life, not them getting together, if that makes sense. And I think that's why it didn't. If I'd gone into it knowing it was that, it probably would have been, maybe, I don't think it would have been a 5-star, but it would have probably been, I probably would have enjoyed it more. But it doesn't matter. I've read it now and it was still a 4-star. Next up, I read Saint's Blood by Sebastian de Castell. This was another 4-star. This was the 3rd book in the Greatcoat series, and I'm glad we've only got one more book in this series left. That's all I'm saying. I'm not loving it. It's not my favourite thing ever. And yeah, I definitely think I'll stick with Sebastian de Castell's YA because I love the Spellslinger series. So yeah, I don't think I'm gonna, after I've read The Greatcoats, I'm not going into any of his other adult books. I think I'm gonna just leave it there, and I don't need to read the prequel or whatever it's called. I'm good, which is a shame, but it's fine. Next up, I read A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, not TJ Kingfisher, T. Kingfisher. I really enjoyed this. This was a 5-star. I wasn't expecting to love this as much as I did. And I know T. Kingfisher has quite a few books. Some are fantasy, some are horror. And I feel like their books are... The well-known ones are the horror ones. And whilst I do have one of the horror books on my TBR for October, which I'm terrified for because I don't do horror, but I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone a little bit. But this was very much a cozy fantasy, and those were the vibes that I wanted, and those were the vibes that were delivered to me. And I had so much fun with this. I will say, the main character has like a little gingerbread, not golem, familiar? I can't remember the name that they used for it, but it just reminds me of Gingy from Shrek, which was not a bad thing for me because I absolutely love the Shrek films, 1 and 2. So yeah. Next, I read Delivery to the Lost City by PG Bell with Helen. We buddy read the first 2 a while back, and then I put this on my TBR because I just wanted to finish a series and I needed to read a middle grade, and I wanted to finish a series. And then Helen commented saying about us buddy reading, and I had completely forgotten who it was I buddy read the first 2 with. I could just remember that I buddy read them with someone. So we ended up buddy reading this, and it was really nice getting back into this world. I really enjoyed this. It was a 4-star. The whole series has been a 4-star for me, but it's a series that I'm actually going to give to my brother for my older nephews on his side. Not my oldest nephews because they're in they're like late teens, early adult years. But I have a nearly 12 and nearly 10-year-old nephew on my brother's side that I think will really like this, especially the older of the 2. So yeah, very happy to pass this on because it was a great series. Next up is one that I got from the library and literally finished the book and then ordered my own copy. It's Cant Spell, Treason Without Tea by Rebecca Thorne. This was a 5-star. This was like all 10s on core pile, 5-star as well. Like, I am obsessed. This was a cozy fantasy that I needed. So it has like Legends and Lattes vibes, which you guys know I love Legends and Lattes and Bookshops and Bone Dust. So when Andy let me know that my triggers were not in this, and the ones that were in there, she told me the level they were, so it didn't affect me. I was absolutely fine. And I'm so glad that she did that because I'm in an iron about whether I wanted to read this book, and I'm annoyed at alternate universe me for not reading this, because somewhere there is an alternative universe where I decide not to read this. I don't get Andy to like tell me trigger warnings, and I just don't read it, and I hate that version of me because I'm missing out on like one of the best books I've read this year. Next up we have Gilded by Marissa Mayer. So this was a 4-star. It scraped a 4-star. It was this close to being a 3. So I joined in on the buddy read on Chloe Reads Books Patreon for this. None of us really loved it, but we all got it off our TBR, which is the main thing. I was really excited about this because it's sort of like a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and I was just bored for most of it. there was one part where something happened and then the next day the pages were just like back to being boring again, and I was like, oh, okay. And then the ending, I think the ending is the only thing that brought it up to a 4-star, because I was just feeling so about it. And then the ending I quite enjoyed. I haven't decided yet whether I want to read the sequel or if I want to just unhaul the sequel without reading it. I haven't decided yet, but I feel like me thinking that means I shouldn't bother and I just should keep this as a standalone. But we'll see. Next up is 3 books in one. So I read all 3 books in Everyday Angel by Victoria Schwab. So we have New Beginnings, Second Chances and Last Wishes. Yes, I logged them as 3 separate books. Yes. So I have been putting this off for the longest time. My parents got me this for Christmas back in like, I think like 2020 or 2021. So this was a TBR of it. And because I keep putting off picking this up, I put it on my lightsaber punishment list for my TBR game. And I pulled the lightsaber for September, which was this one. And I thought, do you know what? Fine. It's happened. I'm finally going to read it. And I was reading it. And honestly, this is so good. It's not my favourite Schwab. I would probably read it again though. All 3 of these come out as 4-star on Core Pile. I really enjoyed them. I liked the little subtle ways they linked. And there were just some really nice messages for younger readers that would be reading this. So yeah, I'm glad I finally read this. I'm now back to having read everything Schwab has written. The world is righted again. Next up we have Spyglass by Maria V. Snyder. This was a 5-star. The whole trilogy has been 5-star. Great, perfect, amazing. I really enjoyed this. I thought this was a really good way to end the series, and I think this, out of the 3 of them, this has been my favourite. I especially loved the like second half of it and like the epilogue-y bit at the end. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I have finished another series. And this is the last Maria V. Snyder book I'm going to own, because apparently the next trilogy is impossible to get in these covers without rebuying the first trilogy, which I'm not going to do. So yeah, I'm not bitter. Next up was Destroy the Day by Bridget Kemmerer. This was a 5-star. Once again, she has smashed it with the series. Now, all 3 books in this series have been 5 stars. However, I feel like this series has definitely got better and better. I absolutely adored the first book. The second book, even though it was a filler book, so much still happened. There were reveals and there was a massive cliffhanger and it was great. And then this book comes along and just builds on everything we've already had. This was a little bit slower starting, which I wouldn't expect for a 3rd book in a trilogy. But because of the size of it, the pacing felt right. And I'm really happy about that, because I was really scared to read this. Because I've had so many series in the past where I've loved book 1, loved book 2, and then book 3 has been a letdown. This is not one of those cases. Next up. Me and Lisa buddy read A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This was a 3-star. I'm gonna be honest, if I wasn't buddy reading it and stubborn, it probably would have been a DNF. This has about, I think, 5 POVs. Four or 5 POVs. I cared about 2. And on the chapters where it wasn't those 2 characters, I just didn't care enough. Like, I wasn't intrigued. I wasn't like interested in the slightest, and I can't actually remember most of what happened. I got an entire half a chapter into a POV before realising, oh wait, yeah, this is that character. Can't even remember that character's name. All I remember is it begins with D. That is not a good book. And I just feel like this was an unnecessary prequel. One of the things I love about Priory of the Orange Tree, yes, it is a beast of a book, but I feel like everything that happens in that book is necessary. There are a lot of POVs in that book, but I was invested in all of them. This just didn't give me that. I wanted that again, but with different characters, and it didn't give me that. So I have no interest in this. And apparently this is an exclusive version, exclusive edition, but I don't know what's exclusive about it. Is there like an additional extra chapter or something? Oh, bonus material. Now read on for bonus material exclusive to this edition. I'm good. I'm good. I just saw a name and yeah, it's one of the characters I don't care about. So I'm not going to bother reading this, and I'm going to have no sadness at unhauling this. That's going to free up space for like 2 books. So yeah, I'm good. Next up, I read The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This was my other 12 books of 2024 pick. Chloe put this in for me. Chloe is a persistent bookworm, not Chloe reads books. And I'm so glad. I've now, again, I was about to say I've read everything Becky Albertalli's written. I haven't, because I still haven't read the sequel to the book she co-wrote with Adam Silvera. I've now read every single Becky Albertalli solo book. I did enjoy this. This was a 4-star. I enjoyed it. I feel like I probably would have 5-starred it if I had read it back when I read Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, because I feel like I am a much different person to when I read that back in like 2017. And I feel like this is 2017 Becca's book, whereas like Imogen obviously is Becca now's book. So I feel like I would have enjoyed this a lot more back then, but I did really enjoy this. And she's just so good at writing characters that you just relate to, even if you don't relate in the way like you would expect. There's just something about her books. Next up is The Horim War by Thea Guanzon. I was terrified to read this because I have said this many times. I have read Landscape with a Blur of Conquerors, which is the fan fiction this has been created from. I read the fan fiction last year and it was one of my favourite things. It was so worth the months and months of reading over 1,200 pages. But I was terrified for this because that is not an alternative universe. It is set very much in the Star Wars world with the Star Wars characters and the Star Wars history and lore and canon events. So I was scared about how this was going to translate into a fantasy. I've heard a lot of people say, who have read the fanfiction and then read this, say it's not good. I'm going to respectfully disagree. This was a 5-star for me. A very low 5-star because there are some things I don't think translated well. I also feel like this should have been a little bit bigger to account for the fact we need a little bit more history and world building in this. I'm hoping we maybe get a bit more in book 2, but I feel like with the fanfiction, we don't need that. We don't need any sort of world building. All we need to know is where in the timeline it is. We know it takes place straight after Force Awakens, which means we know exactly what's happened. We know the entire history of Kylo and Rey and like Leia and all of those. And we don't need any sort of background information, whereas this is not in that world. So I feel like we need more information. We got very little, and I just feel like it would have been a much stronger book and people would have enjoyed it a lot more if it had just that little bit extra world building peppered in. But I do think it has been transitioned to a fantasy quite well. I really like, there's little things like the dragons in this are actual dragons, whereas in the fan fiction, they are spaceships called the Dragon Fleet. Whereas in this, there's actual dragons. And it's just so interesting how she has, like, done this. Because she could have just kept it as a sci-fi and changed all the names of the planets and, like, the Empire and, like, the Republic. And she could have just changed all of that. But she didn't. She made it a fantasy. And I think it was done quite well. So it got a 5-star. And it does mean my bank account's crying because I'm not cancelling my pre-order for the second book because I do want to continue reading this. And I'm very glad I did pre-order this one because it's pretty. Next up, we have Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen. This was my other 3-star. Now, this is a Beauty and the Beast style retelling, reverse harem. So there's 4 princes that turn into beasts. Now, I'm going to just preface this. They're not brothers. They're not related. They are just 4 princes that have all been cursed. Because I was reading a scene and I was like, wait, aren't these related? Aren't these guys related? I could get behind her having relationships with all of them. But if there's other stuff, it's fine. I had to Google. They are not related. Which, this would have been a DNF if they were. But yeah, I'm a little bit weirded out by the fact Elizabeth Helen is actually not one person. It is sisters. And some of the scenes in this, I would not be writing a book like this with my sister. That's weird. I don't want to judge, but I kind of want to judge. And like, that was just kept being in the back of my mind. And I don't feel like it's the best smut I've ever read. I've read better smut. This wasn't it. And the story has not intrigued me enough that I don't think I'm going to be picking up book 2. Which is a shame, because this is a really pretty edition. Next up, we have Thehawthor Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This was a 5-star. Oh my god. I have already, like, not pre-ordered, because it's been out for ages. I have already reserved, like, put the audiobook for book 3 on hold because I need to finish this series. This book, oh my god, this had me on the edge of my seat, literally. I didn't know what was happening, but in a good way. There were so many reveals and things happening. Was it completely logical? No, but I do not care. It was a great time and I'm so glad that I finally read Inheritance Games last month and now I'm getting through the series because I'm obsessed. Next up, we have the Crimson Moth by Kristen Cicerelli. I think that's how you pronounce the author's name. This was another 5-star. The 5 stars were definitely nearer the end of the month. I only read this because Ash loved this book and she thought I would like it. And she was correct. I did really enjoy it. I think one of the main things I really liked about this was the main character reminds me of Selena Sardothian from the Throne of Glass books. And not in the sense that, oh, it's been copied or whatever. In the sense that, like, she just gives me the same vibes. And there are some similarities, but in a good way. There are things that, like, I loved about that character. I'm enjoying seeing it from a different character and with a different writing style. It's really interesting. I love when authors, like, I don't even know if this was inspiration from Selena Sardothian, but if not, it's a great coincidence because this is what I like. I like stuff like this. And also the plot itself was great. I really enjoyed the way magic was done and like the history and like persecution of witches. It was so well done and I cannot wait for book 2 next year. And then the final book that I read in September was The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. I buddy read this with Ash and I had the best time. This is a 5-star. I think this is a new favourite. I'm really glad this is a standalone because I think this was perfectly paced, perfectly done. Everything that needed to be wrapped up was wrapped up. Actually, no, everything was wrapped up. and I had the best time with it. And there is a bird in this called Archie that I am obsessed with. I want a plush of him. And Archie's not even the main character. He's not even a phoenix. He's one of the other animals in the zoo. But I loved the zoo. I loved the characters. It was just so good. And I'm so glad I've read this. I do feel like, though, this was robbed of a top place of favourite book of the month, because this was just that much better for me. This was a full 10s across the board on core pile. I think this was 10s apart from Logic, which was a 9. I can't tell you why, because that's spoilery, but there was just one thing near the end that I was like, oh, the logic on this ain't a 10. So yeah, so this is my favourite book of September. So yeah, that is my wrap up. This was a slightly longer wrap up. I kept babbling. I apologise for that. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what your favourite book you read in September was. But I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye.